Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon or this morning. We have folks dialing in from all across the country. We're so pleased to be able to welcome you to this conversation, a meeting with SBA leadership on changes to the PPP. My name is Rhett Buttle. I am the founder of the Public-Private Strategies Institute, and it is my pleasure to be able to welcome you all to this very important conversation. As many of you may know or may have heard, President Biden announced some changes to the Paycheck Protection Program, which has been a helpful lifeline for many small business owners across the country. For all of us here, we truly believe that small business owners are the backbone of our economy. We know you are the heartbeat of our communities, and we are so thrilled to be able to partner with the U.S. Small Business Administration to make sure that you're getting the information that you need during this critical time. Tonight, our goal is to be able to take as many questions as possible to give you the information that you need over the next few days during this important period. With that, it is now my pleasure to turn the conversation over to someone who is not only a colleague, but a dear friend. It's my pleasure to turn the conversation over to Josh Dixon with the White House Office of Public Engagement. Josh, over to you.
Thanks so much, Rhett. Appreciate that introduction. It's great to be here with you all and welcome everyone. Such a great turnout. We are thrilled to see so many small business owners, folks who lead nonprofits, folks who are just so critical to your communities, and representatives of community-based organizations here on this call. As Rhett mentioned, my name is Josh Dixon, and I have the honor of serving as a senior advisor at the White House Office of Public Engagement, as well as Deputy Director of the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. At the White House, I work on community engagement, as well as really focusing on forming partnerships with organizations that serve people in need. And there are so many of you all who are doing that work. There are so many of you all who work with folks doing that work. So many of you all who are involved in organizations that do that work. And so I'm just thrilled to be here with you all today because as Rhett mentioned, this program is incredibly important, and we want to get the word out as far and wide as possible, so that as many small businesses and communities can benefit from this important investment. As Rhett said, the pandemic really has hit small businesses across the country hard. I want you to know that you have the full commitment of the White House and the U.S. Small Business Administration to address the inequities exposed by COVID-19. Inequities that affect one community affect us all, and that's why President Biden has made it a priority to equitably support our small businesses with crucial relief funds, no matter which zip code they're in. Now, before I hand it over, I want to quickly touch upon President Biden's historic $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, a plan that's up before the Senate right now that could really change the course of the pandemic to build a bridge towards economic recovery. This plan is something that we in the White House really talk about as a statement of values, because in addition to all of the really important work it's doing in communities, it is very targeted towards the most vulnerable, towards the most marginalized, and is very much in alignment with a promise that the president made in the campaign, which is not just to build back from this pandemic, but to build back better. It's something that would effectively cut child poverty in half and lift 11.5 million Americans of all ages out of poverty. And so the bill itself is, as I said, critically important. And there's a lot at stake with this too. If the Senate does not act, right now, what's at stake for us is $15 billion in grants to hardest hit small businesses, a $10 billion investment in successful state, local, and tribal small business financing programs to help small businesses innovate, create and maintain jobs, and provide the essential goods and services that communities depend on. $25 billion in grants for small restaurants that have lost substantial revenue, and an additional $7.25 billion in funding for the Paycheck Protection Program. We all know our economy is at risk right now. And with so many people suffering, it's never been more important for Congress to act. So we really hope for your support with this. But also, we really are thrilled that you're here to learn about the Paycheck Protection Program and how you all can take advantage of that and share that information with members in your community who can do the same. So with that, I'm excited to turn over to my colleague, Cynthia, who is at the U.S. Small Business Administration. Thank you so much for having me, and I will pass it off to Cynthia.
Josh, thank you so very much. And it's so good to reconnect with you again. I'm so glad that you're over at the White House and that we get to partner with you. And thank you, Rhett, and to all your colleagues, your team at PPSI for working with us to engage and to organize this webinar. But most importantly, to our viewers, thank you so much. It's a Friday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and you're here with us, sharing space with us. So really, really, thank you so much on this live stream. Small business owners from across the country and our stakeholders and business partners and resource partners as well. Welcome to the U.S. Small Business Administration. Through SBA's 68 district offices, the agency works in close partnership with the Biden-Harris administration to further leverage our resource partner network and expand on multilingual access and outreach about the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. I can't believe it's been 46 days and where I've officially joined the SBA team to help lead the effort to engage the public in this very critical work. And I chose public service at the SBA because this work is super important to me. It's urgent and it's personal. I was fortunate to grow up in South Texas in a small family-run business started by my grandparents who immigrated from Northern Mexico to South Texas. And as a third-generation entrepreneur, I grew up working in a small tortilla factory alongside my abuelos, my tios, my tias, my cousins, my parents, my brother. And in this small business, that helped pay for my college tuition. I was the first in my family to graduate from college. So I am the product of a small business. I know the value of a small business and the dreams it fulfills. And right now, dreams are being deferred. And that is what brings us here today to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program and the relief it can bring to small businesses and to families as well. And with that, I want to kick it over to a colleague, an incredible leader, Kate Latour, who is the Director of Government Relations at the National Cooperative Business Association, CLUSA International. Kate?
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I appreciate that introduction. And thank you to SBA and the Public-Private Strategies Institute for having this today. The changes from the Biden-Harris administration will be critical to really ensure that the dollars are reaching the smallest of small businesses. And SBA and PPSI's outreach is so greatly appreciated, both to navigate existing programs and make further investments through the American Rescue Plan. NCBACLEUSA, we represent co-ops across all sectors of the economy: agriculture, retail, worker co-ops, electric co-ops, and everything in between. And we've been hit just as hard as non-co-op counterparts in the business community. But the structure has made a difference because every member owner has a voice, an equal share, and a vote in the business and how it is navigated through the tough decisions of the pandemic. The size also helps this flexibility. The average worker co-op, for example, is about 11 employees. And importantly, about 60% of worker co-ops are composed of people of color, and co-ops across all sectors are prominent in underserved communities, which again goes to show that the changes from the Biden-Harris administration will be so helpful to provide this targeted support. I want to take the opportunity to remind co-ops that the Paycheck Protection Program does not require a personal guarantee, and with that small change, PPP has been a lifeline. We know that about 2,500 co-ops have accessed PPP funds so far, and it's helped preserve at least 100,000 jobs. And so really reaching those small businesses will be critical. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a quick shout out to our credit union members and banking cooperatives who have been such important partners on the lending side of this program, and again, especially reaching small businesses. Not every co-op is familiar with SBA programs, so NCBACLEUSA is happy to help co-ops navigate the process or connect with lenders who are familiar with co-ops. And for the co-ops on the call, we do have specific frequently asked questions and responses on our website, ncbacleusa.coop. I know there are a lot of questions to get to today, so with that, I'm really honored to be introducing SBA Associate Administrator for the Office of Capital Access, Patrick Kelly.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Kate, for the introduction. It's great to be here. As has already been pointed out, the Paycheck, as you might gather from the introduction, my office oversees the Paycheck Protection Program, which has been a critical lifeline to America's small businesses. But for too often, the smallest of the small businesses have not been able to access the program in the ways that would be best for them. And so last week, President Biden announced some very critical changes to this program to make the smallest of the small businesses eligible to find the relief that they need. So just to give you a high level of where we're at as we head into the final 3 weeks of this, in terms of the access to capital in rural areas, we're up 30%. In terms of program participation by minority deposit institutions and certified development financial institutions, the lending is up 40%. And overall, we're seeing a much greater percentage of loans going to businesses that are the smallest of the small. 10 or less employees are up significantly as well. Last week, President Biden took additional steps, which we will get into today. First off, one of the significant opportunities for small businesses with 20 or less employees was in a 14-day exclusive PPP loan application period for those small businesses. So what's important to recognize is that during this period from February 24th until March 9th, only businesses that are 20 or fewer employees can seek PPP loan authorization from the SBA's program. So this gives you exclusive access and demonstrates our commitment to making sure that those, as President Biden refers to, mom and pop businesses get to the front of the line. In addition to that change, we have announced changes that are pretty significant to self-employed, sole proprietor, and independent contractors, where previously the relief was hard to get because the calculation for PPP required you to demonstrate net income from your 2019 Schedule C. And so last week, or Wednesday of this week, we announced a new rule that allows you to calculate forgiveness using your gross income amount from your Schedule C 2019. So that will typically give those same borrowers, independent contractors, sole proprietors, and self-employed individuals higher relief amounts in the PPP loan program. In addition, we eliminated some exclusionary factors that were impacting folks that unnecessarily. So first, fairer access for returning citizens by eliminating restrictions for certain ex-felons, allowing those delinquent on federal student loan debt to still apply, and ensuring access for eligible immigrant-owned small businesses. So by using the ITIN number to apply. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Renee for some questions.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And to everyone out there, we see you in the chat. There are so many questions. We see that you guys are voting on questions as well. So we're going to try to get to as many as possible. Want to go ahead and preference with two things. One, we are not going to ask specific questions to people because there are so many of you with questions, but we're going to make sure that we generalize it so that way we can make sure that we're touching on numerous situations that can be helpful to so many of you. Secondly, this is being recorded, so we're going to make sure that you all get a copy of this recording as well. So you can watch it, send it to friends, tell others about it as well. All right, you ready, Patrick? We're going to dive into some of these questions here because it's quite a few. So here we go. I see here that there's a couple that are talking about funding for the first round wasn't enough for some of the businesses. Are they eligible to receive additional funding for the second round if they receive some from the first round?
Yeah, so yes. So part of the current phase of PPP loan program allows for a second draw. And as I mentioned, because of the new rule put into effect on Wednesday, and lenders began processing these applications this morning at 9 a.m. on new forms, supporting that new calculation for gross income related to self-employed individuals, sole proprietors, and independent contractors. You should be able to seek greater relief from the second draw than you were potentially from the first draw. For businesses that are with employees or 20 or less, right now you have exclusive access to apply for that second draw. So obviously that enables your lenders to prioritize those draws.
Great. And just to take that a little step further, so if you were a person who received some money, you didn't think it was enough, you can go back and obtain more money now. And let's say you were in the middle of your application process before the rules came out. Are you able to increase that amount right now?
Yeah, so not to increase it, but you can withdraw. So if you've received a second draw and the funds have already been dispersed, you've received a second draw and those funds have been dispersed. So you can't unring that bell. However, if your application has not yet been processed, is currently underway, and you can ask your lender to withdraw the application to ensure that you can apply with the new calculation. So if you are a sole proprietor, self-employed individual, or independent contractor, that might be in your strategic interest if you're applying for a second draw to pull it back, because the new calculation with gross income as opposed to net income would almost certainly mean a higher amount of relief. If, however, you're another entity that has 20 or less small businesses, that rule does not apply to you, and therefore, you should tell your lender to go quicker, to get your relief, and so you wouldn't want to pull that back.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, naturally, I think a lot of people are going to ask this, and we're seeing this, is what is this forgiveness? Are they eligible? What are the rules? Can you talk about forgiveness?
Yeah, so first off, the Paycheck Protection Program is a loan program that it is anticipated, and it is what Congress and the executive branch wants to have happen, that it be forgiven. So the whole point of the program was to get relief out fast, and then for you to be able to seek forgiveness. And as evidence of that, and this is very important, evidence of that, almost a third of the first phase draws, which totaled 5.2 million, have been processed. So forgiveness applications have been processed, and 99.1% of those forgiveness applications that have been processed received full forgiveness. So I just want to reiterate that you are eligible for forgiveness. Your process for forgiveness runs through your lending intermediary. So if you used a CDFI or an MDI or a community bank or a large national bank, there's over 5,000 different lending intermediaries that participated. You go back to that lending intermediary to apply for forgiveness. The general rules are focused around 60% of the proceeds have to be used towards payroll, either over an 8-week or 24-week period, and 40% can be used for other eligible business purposes, including rent, utilities, and things like that. So as evidenced by the early bird forgiveness applications, 99.1% of those have received full forgiveness. So I know that some people might have experienced lenders hitting a pause button on forgiveness over the last few weeks in order to process second draws and first draws. Rest assured that they will resume processing forgiveness. You should seek forgiveness, and that's that. It should work out for you.
Well, that's good to know. There's a lot of questions coming in about the whole forgiveness piece. Seeing some questions too about, especially because forgiveness is so important, when the rules expire. So we know that there's this 2-week window about March 9th for 20 and fewer employees, that people are wondering, what does that mean? Is there an extension? But also, will there be an extension to the March 31st deadline to the PPP program?
Yeah, so first off, the exclusivity period that I spoke about up top, the 14-day period that President Biden established to help the smallest of the small business, the what he refers to as the mom and pop businesses, have exclusive access, does sunset March 9th, but that does not preclude any of you from seeking a second draw or first draw on March 10th and all the way through March 31st. So the 14-day period was designed for you and only you, but after March 9th, you can continue to apply just as you would have during that 14-day period. So nothing sunsets then. It is true, Renee, that the program does sunset as of now, March 31st. I would like to point out that you should move as quickly as possible because it does take the lender time to process your application with the SBA. So, applying, before March 31st would be preferable. There are discussions in DC about potentially extending it, as has been done before, by the prior Congress. So that may happen, but right now you need to act as if the program is going to come to a close on March 31st, and move quickly.
Yeah, we urgency is really important in this matter.
Yes.
I'm seeing a lot about credit score, credit history,
Right.
when it comes to the application process. If you have a bankruptcy, less desirable credit, are you eligible for a PPP?
Yeah. So by definition, we're in an emergency, as President Biden has pointed out, and the emergency is that for the most part, most of our society has been shuttered as a result of dealing with this health crisis, and so your sales, your revenue, are down, and you have taken emergency measures that would impact your credit score, for example. So it is completely foreseeable that your credit score and your trailing 12-month history of sales that lenders typically look to evaluate your credit does not look good. That's okay. This program does not use credit scoring. I realize that some lenders out there have resorted to credit scoring new customers that they don't have a prior relationship with the bank. That is a choice they can make, but it is not a requirement of the program. And there certainly isn't a traditional bank credit process that's going to evaluate your tax returns and financials. It's a simple calculation, for the most part, of either gross income in the case of the new rule that applies to independent contractors, self-employed individuals, or sole proprietors, or 2.5 times payroll, your gross wages for the small businesses with 20 or less or under. But there isn't a credit decision that's being made in the traditional lending sense. That said, the one restriction that does preclude you from seeking this is if you've had a past personal or small business bankruptcy from applying for the program.
Interesting. So if you had a personal or a small business bankruptcy, it will preclude you from actually obtaining a loan. But if you have not, you have an eligibility to obtain a loan.
That's correct.
Good to know. Good to know. There's a lot of questions too about like determination of time of existence of business, if you will.
Yep.
Not going to say the time frame because I'm seeing different time points of people starting their business, but going to just say in 2020 people started their business. Are they eligible for a PPP loan?
Yeah, so if you started your business before February 15th, 2020, you are eligible for a PPP loan. If you started your business after that point in time, you are not eligible for this program. So that's the general rule of thumb. So any business that was started late in 2019 is eligible for this program as long as it was started before February 15th, 2020. And the thinking behind that is that you started a business once the pandemic was foreseeable and had taken hold. And so if you chose to start a business at that time, you must have taken that into account into your business planning and so forth. So, but obviously before that, if you started your business in January or before that in late 2019, you did not know that the pandemic was going to happen. So that's the thinking behind that.
Are the rules retroactive?
So no, the gross income calculation is not currently retroactive, and that's due to some esoteric regulatory challenges. However, Congress and the administration are aware of that problem. And so there may be a solution. There is not now, and there may never be, but that is currently the rules.
Interesting. Okay. Well, at least there's some work that's trying to be done with that. There are some questions here, like someone is saying here too, I'm seeing two people here where they're saying they've taken out EIDL loans and PPP and are in need for an additional round of PPP.
Yeah.
Are they eligible to do so?
Yes. So if you took out a first draw and you had an EIDL advance and an EIDL loan, you are eligible for a second draw. Also, I should point out that over the holiday season, there was a improvement in the lame duck sessions bill that removed the problem that was coming, that if you had taken out an EIDL advance, it was going to be deducted from the forgivable amount on your PPP loan. So as of that bill's passage, your EIDL advance will not be deducted from your forgiveness amount. So you can receive full forgiveness on your PPP draws and still have used the EIDL advance, which was the $10,000 grant. In addition, there were issues with the IRS's interpretation of the forgiveness dollars being a taxable income. That too was fixed, and so now at the federal level, your PPP draws, when they are full forgiven, will not be counted towards your income. It does still exist at the state level that your forgiveness amount may be, depending on the state, be taxed for state income, but that is no longer the case on your federal taxes.
Okay. Seeing a lot of sole proprietor questions and trying to piece it together here. Given that I'm a sole proprietor of an LLC, would you recommend that I apply for a second draw through my bank or via the SBA? And can I apply for a loan through the SBA?
So, so the way that the PPP loan works, and for that matter, the way that the traditional SBA lending programs work, is we work through intermediaries. So, so you would need to find a certified development financial institution, a minority deposit institution, a credit union, a community bank, regional or national bank, of which 5,000 plus are participating in the PPP loan program, and together contributed to 5.2 million loans and almost $1 trillion lent. So there are a number of intermediaries out there of all different stripes. You can go to the SBA.gov lender match site, and I should add that the President Biden's nominee for the SBA administrator role, Isabel Guzman, worked on that solution during her time in the Obama administration. So we're all hopeful she's confirmed. But those are some resources that you see on the screen there. There are local resources, state and local resources, partners, in addition to 68 district offices across all 50 states and territories that you can reach out to. And then perhaps old-fashioned or new-fashioned, you can go to Google with your question and you will find a multitude of participants. And ordinarily, it might feel a little bit worrisome to go to the internet and kind of make sense of it all. But the good thing about the PPP is that it is a uniform product. So every single lender issues the exact same product. There are no hidden fees or collateral required or personal guarantees, as Kate mentioned. It is a uniform product. And so while it might be daunting to work with a lending partner that you didn't know previously, in this particular instance for this loan, you can rest assured that it's standardized. And so you will get the same terms no matter who you are or where you are.
Thanks for that. And that's good to know that no matter where you go, you are getting the same standardized loan. Now, with that too, I'm seeing some people who are like, well, I've had some discrimination. Where can people go if they are facing that? And then where can they then apply?
Yeah, so if you feel you're being discriminated against for this, I would suggest that you go to the Office of the Inspector General website, lodge a formal complaint. And there are anonymous complaints too. So if you feel like you have to bank with somebody for, business reasons and you don't want to, have retribution or whatever you fear, that you can lodge anonymous complaints. So if you are feeling discriminated against or in any way treated unfairly, that feels extra than just extra paperwork, you should do that. If you're just dealing with your lender perhaps being confused or you being confused or both of you being confused, which would be a very standard and common national phenomenon of PPP, you can go to SBA.gov local-assistance, as you see it down there, and you can find that network of resource partners based on your zip code. And they come in a lot of different varieties, but they're all kind of aware of this program and participating in it. And those resource partners are also can not only help you with the federal programs, but can give you insights on how to access state and municipal programs as well. And so you can stack those things up to get through this incredibly hard time.
Yeah, that's really good to know. I'm seeing some questions about getting pre-approvals from the SBA directly. Is that possible to get a pre-approval from the SBA and then going to a lender? Or I'm seeing quite a few. Can you get approved by the SBA ahead of time? Is there a way to get SBA loan number pre-approved?
Yeah, no, and pre-approval is also, just as a person who's a lender formally and now in the administration, is somewhat of a misnomer. Or just I don't want to say. I think you asked me a question earlier, Renee. We've been on some calls together about myths. That is one myth that it persists. But you can't go to the SBA for pre-approval. What you can do, which is perhaps analogous to pre-approval, is you can work with a resource partner, and they can prepare you for the types of things in a normal banking experience that you may need to provide documentation and so forth. But for PPP, the good news is, as I mentioned earlier, this is a standard uniform product offering. And unlike a traditional loan where there's a credit score involved, an underwriting process that looks at your 36-month trailing financial statements, tax returns, et cetera, where you need to typically pledge collateral, provide a personal guarantee, and so forth. None of those things are required for a PPP loan. And the other thing that you would typically be concerned about, and with good reason, is am I going to pay fees? Are these fees fair? Is this rate fair? In the case of a PPP loan, you are not paying fees, and the rate is 1% over 5 years. So again, this is a product that was designed to be one size fits all, which has created other problems, which is what President Biden was addressing last week. But in terms of the terms that you are seeking, it is uniform, and that's to the good.
Well, that's good to know, and it's good that that is being done. There's a lot of independent contractors on here. I know we talked about it a little bit on the top of the call. Independent contractors want to know, how do they file? How do they do this? How do they become a part of this? Some are wondering more specifically, they pay themselves. So how and they don't take a salary at all. How do they become eligible for a PPP?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So first off, on the SBA.gov and USTreasury.gov websites are calculator tools that allow you to put in the type of entity you are and to calculate what your loan amount would be. So those are two resources. But the other thing that I would suggest is typing in, and I've as Renee knows, I've gone to Google and typed in S corps. So in the case of S corps, you typically take distributions, and you may pay yourself a reasonable wage, you may not, but those type of questions are in abundance on Google. And in addition to ads, there are a number of resources. In addition, you may or may not, but a lot of you will work with a CPA to file your taxes. CPAs have been a really integral part of this process from the beginning. The AICPA has put out wonderful tools on its website for these types of questions. I'd encourage you to go there for information. And then third-party payroll reports. So to the extent, in the case of an independent contractor, probably not exactly relevant, but for the broader group, payroll report providers are also preparing specific reports for payroll for PPP purposes over the covered period, and they can help you with these issues as well if you use that. And so those are a number of different ways. And then finally, the lending community has received the rule change for gross income calculation. It was published Wednesday. They began making loans at 9 a.m. this morning, Eastern time. And so through the weekend, lenders will come online in terms of understanding how to apply this. And so as an independent contractor, you should be able to approach lenders. And again, there are traditionally 7A only allows for credit unions or state or federally chartered banks to participate. But in the case of the PPP program, there are a whole host of other entities, financial technology firms, certified development financial institutions, minority deposit institutions that are all able to participate. So again, over 5,000 lenders are out there that are meaningfully participating across the country.
That's good to know as well. Seeing some questions about what is the max amount that someone can take out as a loan with the PPP.
Yeah, so it depends. So it depends on your entity and your documentation. So for example, if you have payroll and you're a multi-employee firm, the calculation is 2.5 times payroll. If, however, you are a independent contractor, self-employed individual, sole proprietor, you are going to calculate gross income from your Schedule C on your 2019. For those S Corp questions related to distributions, but I pay a regional wage and so forth, again, you can seek out those other resources to get a heads up on how you'll need to document your request. But But so it depends. And again, this is why CPAs and resource partners and so forth can be helpful to navigate for your specific set of circumstances. And lenders have become accustomed after 5.2 million of these things on helping you, figure out your way through.
We're seeing a lot of questions too here about Schedule C. Are you able to talk about the changes with Schedule C kind of universally?
So in terms of, ordinarily you would have had to, because you did not typically have a payroll involved in your business, your calculation would have been your net taxable income listed on your Schedule C in 2019. So if for whatever reason your expenses in that year were high, for example, you started your business, there were a lot of startup costs, and your margins were thinner, you would be eligible for less relief than if you calculated it through a gross income calculation. So you're applying a higher number by definition from your taxable, from your Schedule C to determine your loan amount. So what I have seen in the instances where people have contacted me is I got $6,000 on my my first draw in 2020, calculated through net income. I'm now eligible for $16,000, on my second draw as a result of the new gross income. Can I request my application back from my lender before they fund? And the answer is yes, and you should do that to receive more relief.
Awesome. There's a question, and I saw one earlier too, about some other things. Can I use the PPP money to buy real estate, inventory, cars, car insurance? Essentially, what can you use the PPP for? What can you not use the PPP for?
Yeah, so a lot of the instances that you just described are not eligible uses of the PPP proceeds. So the Paycheck Protection Program was designed for the proceeds to go towards payroll or gross wages, or income in the case of sole proprietors, et cetera, that don't necessarily generate a payroll. So that was the primary eligible use. So therefore, that's why 60% of the proceeds need to be used for that purpose. 40% of the proceeds need to be used for utilities, rent, for those type of business purposes. This is not designed to be a growth loan or a loan to buy owner-occupied real estate. So what I would say is if you are in the position where you are seeking to grow, which is what is evidenced by Renee's question, there are 7A loans and 504 loans that the SBA works through the same type of intermediaries, state chartered and federally chartered banks and federally supported credit unions across the country in all 50 states and territories. And those products are quite attractive to be used for business acquisition purposes. So in that instance, there's a 10-year note with no prepayment penalties. The interest rates are capped at 2.75 over a base rate, and there's no covenants, and you can obtain that loan without having fixed assets or collateral. You do have to provide a personal guarantee. So sorry, Kate, over 20% for ownership interests, but that's an example of a business acquisition purpose. There's also owner-occupied real estate where you can get a 20 to 25-year mortgage, and those longer time horizons are really key, coupled with no prepayment penalties, because they allow for lower monthly debt service, which typically makes sense. So there's a lot of really good tools that as we move from emergency phase of the pandemic into recovery, don't forget about these products as you move forward.
That's also good to know. Seeing some questions about, can you please explain comparing revenue loss for Q2 2019 to Q2 2020 to qualify for loan forgiveness?
Yes. So so first off, it's not necessarily for loan forgiveness, but it's more for calculating your second draw. And you will have to, in order to receive a second draw, you have to demonstrate that you had a 25% or greater loss comparing one fiscal quarter of 2020 with the same fiscal quarter of 2019. So you can choose any quarter, but that's how you calculate that. And then that enables you to qualify for a second draw. And then as you go forward to process forgiveness, the other eligibility, the other use of proceeds rule, 60% towards payroll and 40% to those other eligible non-payroll expenses like rent and utilities apply towards your calculation of whether or not you're qualified for full forgiveness. And as I mentioned, of the over a third of the 5.2 million first draws have been submitted for forgiveness, and 99.1% of those applications have received full forgiveness.
And that is a good stat. So definitely apply for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Are ex-offenders eligible for loans?
Yeah, so this is a really important point. Historically, in SBA products and in a lot of things, related to check the box and so forth, the answer would have been no. However, President Biden last week removed that barrier by saying if you have committed a felony or a misdemeanor over 5 years ago, and you are not on parole by definition or probation, you are eligible to obtain a PPP loan. And I should say that the incoming SBA nominee, and let's knock on wood, hope she's confirmed by the Senate, Isabel Guzman, worked in the Obama administration on this very issue to modify forms related to that. So this is a really important point. It's also incredibly good that it's bipartisan support now. And it's consistent really with, how we view fairness, or how we should view fairness in our society. You did something wrong, you paid your dues, now you are forgiven.
Thank you. And that's really, really good to know. So if you have been formerly incarcerated, you are able to apply for a loan and be able to help your business recover. That is amazing. There are a ton of questions. More specifically, there's a few going back to the calculator tool you mentioned. Are you able to provide a link or state where that tool is located again on the website?
Well, I don't have the exact link fully out, but you are able to access it through that. What I would also say, what I've found is the quickest path to anything like this is to state in a Google search. And I recognize there are other search engines there, so they're all created equal, but put the exact request that you're seeking, and there should pop up a ton of those. But as I mentioned, if you do go to SBA.gov and you go to US Treasury, there should be calculator tools there to help you. I also pointed out the AICPA is also a great website for all things PPP and calculations, both for forgiveness and new loan origination.
Lots of questions about, I didn't take out an EIDL or a PPP. Am I able to take one now?
Yes. Yes, you can seek a first draw PPP loan now, and if you're a business 20 or less employees, you're eligible exclusively now up until March 9th. But then after March 9th, any small business defined as 300 employees or less can seek a first draw PPP loan.
And then, oh gosh, there's so many questions. They're rapid fire. Can you repeat the acronym again? You said EICPA?
AICPA. So I want to say American Institution of Certified Professional Accountants. It's close enough, but it's definitely AICPA. Yeah.
Got it. For startups, if you are a new startup, are you able to apply?
So if startup can mean different things. So for example, in the SBA's 7A programs, startup means your business has started in the last 24 months. Startup could mean you literally started up last month. But in the case of PPP, you had to have started your business before February 15th, 2020, in order to be eligible for the PPP program. And again, it's presumed that if you started a business during the pandemic, which, bully on you, like good job, you knew the risk because, obviously it's a pandemic. So, but prior to that date, no one could foresee what was about to happen. And so that's the logic.
All right. And I think we're going to close with this question. What is the guidance for payroll after the second PPP was funded?
What was the guidance for payroll after the second?
For payroll.
So,
yeah, sorry.
That's okay. So I think what people are trying to say is, well, let me take a few different stabs. So first off, for multi-employee firms, not much has changed from your first draw to your second draw, except for the qualifier, which you have to show a reduction in sales, comparing one quarter in a quarter in 2020 to the same quarter in 2019, and then you can receive a second draw. And then from there, documenting the 60% went to payroll is the same as the first draw, and that documentation it involves payroll reports generally, or QuickBooks reports that are generated by your controller or you. But if we're talking about the new change in how we calculate what is payroll for a sole proprietor, independent contractor, or self-employed individual, moving from net income to gross income, the documentation for that remains the Schedule C. And then in terms of applying for forgiveness, again, the same rules apply, 60-40 to seek forgiveness. So one thing that I really want to point out too is that if you think about the way that PPP works, you're taking out money that is capped at $20,833 for ownership draws, for ownership wage, that's calculated through the income, or you're taking out 2.5 times your business's payroll, but you have 24 weeks, right? So you've only taken out 2.5 weeks, or you've taken out like, one quarter, the rough equivalent of that in income if you meet the cap, and you have 24-week period to show that you used it towards that eligible wages purpose, on top of the fact that you probably had monthly utility costs, you may have rent, and those things. So it is designed, again, and the numbers bear this out, that of the third that have applied for forgiveness, 99.1% have been fully forgiven.
Well, and again, that stat is really great to know. And I think this is where we can end the Q&A for today. And again, there are so many questions, and we want to thank so many people for being on this call so late on a Friday night, for one, sharing their stories about what's happening to their business, and also trying to find solutions to save their business, because we understand this is what makes you all thrive. We're here for you. We want to make sure that you're finding solutions to be successful during this difficult time. We want to thank our partners again, the Small Business Administration, stakeholder groups, LISC, the Main Street Alliance, NCBACLEUSA. We want to thank our speakers today, Josh from the White House, Kate from NCBA, and Cynthia from the Small Business Administration, and all of you for attending. We know that this is a difficult time. And again, we want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you. We are continuing this series and have a few more events coming up. Tomorrow, there are 2 more webinars, one at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is focusing on veterans, self-employed, independent contractors, sole proprietors, and employees with less than 20 employees. And then another one, a general in case you missed it, at 4 p.m. And then Monday, we're having an LGBTQ restaurateur and youth entrepreneurs at 3 p.m. Again, they are open to anyone to attend. We wish that everyone can attend all of these. So please feel free to register, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your fellow business owners to attend one of these. And hopefully we're able to answer some of your questions and some of theirs as well. Again, this was being recorded in live stream. So check out the Public-Private Strategies Institute website, Facebook page, as well as the Small Business Administration's Facebook Live to see this. And we're also going to send this out via email. We thank you again so much for joining us tonight, and look forward to seeing you at another one of our web series. Thank you so much and have a great night.